And now, coming to you from your computer screen is a man who has something he would like to say, addressing those of you paying attention to this stream. Here he is, Adam, the book reader at his finest. Adam, what have you to say? I say, hello.
And with that introduction to this epic tale, welcome to this month's episode of the Hundreds. I'm your co-host Alex, and you just heard from my elegant co-host Adam. Uh, sorry for the delay. That one is entirely on me, guys. But without further ado, let's quick get into the early stuff so we can get to talking about the book.
Yeah, sure thing. If you joined us, if you joined us for our pre-show before our beautiful faces showed up, you probably heard some music. That was "Fearless First" by Incompetech. I always have the stream muted. I assume that still plays.
It
If you'd
does.
like to find out more about Fearless First and Incompetech, head over to incompetech.filmmusic.io to learn more. Otherwise, we are the DM's Table. You can head over to dmstable.com to find out everything you would want to know about who we are and what we do. Alex, why don't you tell us about the book we're here to talk about?
Yes, this month on the 800s, we'll be talking about A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin, known as one of the seminal fantasy books of the modern era. We follow the tale of a young man named Sparrowhawk at first, and we eventually learn for his affinity for the birds themselves. Sparrowhawk wanders the world searching for the magic hidden deep in the names of everything that exists on the continent of Earthsea. Wow. Sorry, my computer is freaking out and it just closed my page with the introduction. I'm sorry about that. Hold on just a moment.
Wing it! Wing it!
All right. Fine. Okay. I'm trying to remember this from mostly memory. Sparrowhawk finds his way to the depths of the Magic Academy, where he learns his true name, Gaunt. But he doesn't stop there. In his insatiable lust for the learning of names and the depths of magic, he finds himself in the place of the forbidden and unleashes a shadow upon the world, one which seeks him and he seeks eternally, back and forth, to and fro, across the lands of Earthsea, until he becomes a wizard of such.
Hooray!
Hooray! It was slightly better worded.
Oh no, I forgot something.
No.
Hang on. Welcome to the 800s. I totally forgot to update the little text.
All right, so let's get a quick overview in and
Yeah. So if this is your first time joining us, first off, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you here. We are a discussion show. What that means is Alex and myself are in search of topics to discuss. That can be a topic or a question. If you have such topic or question, feel free to throw it in chat. Alex and myself will pose a topic or question for conversation. While we're talking about what we think about the given topic, feel free to add your thoughts in chat and we'll give you a shout out if you say something cool, interesting, controversial, related to the topic at hand, stuff. That's pretty much it though. This show is much more fun with communication and audience participation.
yes, and on that note, we are trying to create a fun, supportive community over here at DM's Table where people can feel free to nerd out and love the things that they love. So, two things: bring kids around at your own discretion, because we do fucking swear sometimes, although we try not to do it all the time. So, and adult themes and topics. But in the round of it all, just be nice or fuck off.
All right, with that, let's get the conversation flowing. Alex, chat, Alan behind the scenes. What were your first impressions of A Wizard of Earthsea?
Um, First impressions is this book has a very specific style and voice to it that just immediately took me to great epics like um Dante's Inferno, the Odyssey, uh the Iliad, like those very classic epics where there's a very big focus on world building and what the character is doing, but the interactions serve those two purposes. There's not really a lot of depth to the interactions. It's just like it's very exposition heavy. Let's put it that way. Just right from the jump.
Hence my intro to the show there.
I see you noticed too. So was that also your first impression, or did you have others?
Yeah, I had heard of this book before and I had never gotten around to reading it despite knowing about its existence for years and years and being like I should pick that up sometime. It being a classic and being out for decades, like I should really check it out.
Mhm.
And um I think I think given that reaction to this book going in was probably setting it up with too much hope. Um, I think I expected it to be something grander than I think it turned out to be. Specifically, I kept waiting for the book to start, and then I realized I was halfway through the book. And I was like, oh shit, okay, that's just the style. Got
Yep.
it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it feels like you have to treat it like one of those classic styles, like V.S. Drake said. It's very, there's good bones, but the writing style is very old school in that it is just establish the thing through either dialogue, what the character is doing, or just general straight up exposition, and move on to the next thing. And it does make me wonder, though, with these books, how well that world gets filled in. Was this pretty prototypical for the beginning of a series, like a fantasy series? I haven't read too many like high fantasy things that are from an older era. It's pretty much Lord of the Rings, this, and most of the other fantasy stuff. I don't know if it's even considered high fantasy. Like,
Yeah.
uh, so it does make me wonder: is this something that gets filled in subsequent books or no?
Yeah, I'm just gonna make this a topic. I'm just gonna put pros here real quick.
All right.
Uh, um, I can't help but equate this to another very popular book that came out in a very similar time, The Lord of the Rings,
Mm.
which I think
I mean, it's
predates this
similar,
by a few years.
like 50.
Yeah. When did a wizard
Wizard of Earthsea, I thought was
or
like 60s, 70s, and Lord of the Rings,
68, yeah.
yeah, and Lord of the Rings
50s.
is well before that.
Yeah, but like I look at the Lord of the Rings books, and you get a lot of very similar kind of prose with the wandering. I would consider it summary-esque feel to the story
Mhm,
compared to uh, current high fantasy stories. I think that is extremely similar, except when you look at Tolkien's writing style, it's a lot more character to character interaction. Where Earthsea, I feel like, relied heavily on setting a scene and not necessarily placing characters in that scene. Would you agree with that statement, or do you think that's inaccurate?
I would say for the most part, yeah, I would agree with it. I think that it slightly depends on the scene, but I would say on the whole, yeah. For the most part, I think the prose in this is very academic, for lack of a better word, of just there's not a lot of fat to it. You know, there's
Yeah.
just it's it's not very lilt. You know, there are more poetic instances, and there is kind of a cadence to the way that this book moves along that gives it kind of that more poetic feel, like great epic poems like, again, the Odyssey and the Iliad, that it's not quite as much because, you know, there's not verse or like an actual
Yeah.
like meter to it, but there is kind of a like even the dialogue when they're talking back and forth is, you know, I get it's mostly wizards talking to wizards or dragons or other entities, and there's not really a lot of interaction with lay people, and when it is, it's pretty minimal.
It
But there is
feels
like, a very direct, like, this is the thing we're talking about, and we're talking about the thing, and this is how that thing relates to the other thing, and that's how you better understand the first thing.
yeah. VS Drake says uh he definitely picked up the old school vibe. Very classic feel. He also called out odd depth about settings, but everything is kind of two-dimensional. Um, yeah, you know, I what I'll say a point in favor of Earthsea here is a lot of the times I feel like in current novels, um, authors like to state this character is peeved or this character is being whimsical. You know, they state what's going on. Where this one is like, Ged walks up to a village and he addresses the villagers completely differently than the way he just addressed the dragons.
Mhm.
And I feel like we're supposed to interpret that as being like, oh, Ged wants to be like, I'm a mysterious wizard of few words. And
Mhm.
wherein when he was interacting with the dragons, he was like, I've got to be all bravado and spook the shit out of these motherfuckers.
Yeah,
No,
that is a good very good point. Uh, sorry if I interrupted,
no,
but,
you're good. You're
it's like
good. I was
I was just
rapping.
like, you just mind went like this, and my started firing off on all the timings, but yeah, that's, like, a great way to put something I hadn't been able to put my finger quite on, or at least not articulate, because there are a lot of times in this book where it is very direct, but the thing that isn't direct is intent. Intent comes through context in a way that we don't see as often, and it's just accepted as that too. It doesn't have to be explained, it just kind of is, and the consequences of that intent follow through in what comes next in the story, which
Yeah.
is, again, not something we see a ton of. There is a bit of it um in like Lord of the Rings has some of that sort of thing going on, especially when you have interactions between different factions or races within the world, whereas here it's just in between anybody. So it's just kind of like the baseline, which is, you know, very interesting to mull over. You mentioned the settings bit, and I would like to make that like our next topic. So
Yeah.
what did you think about how settings were presented in this book?
Um, you know, I would equate it to like it almost felt like we were reading a play script, kind of like I got to get my actors in the mindset of what scene they're in and then go. Um like if to me it felt like every time we changed settings it was a real quick overview of the setting and then we jumped into something. There were occasional exceptions to this rule. I feel like the dragon fight is one exception.
Mhm.
Maybe the wizard college is another. Well, I don't know about college, but the wizard castle or whatever you call it, school, the wizard school. We'll go with that. Wizard school was another exception to the rule, but a lot of the times it was just kind of like, here you are, a horizon above this village. There are people here, and Ged. And he walks up and he says, hello, villagers. And then he leaves because there's nothing else to do here.
Um, yeah, it's certainly set up like that. Uh, the settings for me, this is where I keep bringing up the Iliad and the Odyssey, but the Odyssey in particular does this, where it's just like the setting is set up super quickly so they can get to the plot, because that is the thing. It is like, here is the story as if each separate setting could be its own little, like, short story, right?
Yeah,
So it makes them feel very separate to each other, despite the
yeah,
fact that
that's what Via Strake said too. Each part of this book could have been expanded and made their own books.
which again makes me curious as to whether or not this gets into more depth in later books. But the Odyssey is like that classic example of, Odysseus arrived on this island. His objective was this thing, and he accomplished it through this clever or dumb luck means, and that's kind of how this book went as well. Is Sparrowhawk arrived on this island. Uh, he was comfortable there for a while until dragons started fucking around, and then he had to go fix the dragons. So, you know, the settings were, it was really almost like reading a map, is like it was a map with like a little pop-up page for each little portion of the map.
Yeah.
you know and it wasn't necessarily bad, it was just very truncated in the way that they were set up. Now, that being said, the settings themselves, I really had an easy time imagining what they were like. And I think that speaks to good writing, where when he was in the village, I felt like the village where his classmate lived. I really felt what it was like to like walk into a village and be the stranger that people don't trust. I when he goes to the school, I felt like really what it felt to be like in this center of learning in a world that clearly doesn't have a ton of it, and it's usually pretty separated. None of that. It was very easy to put myself in those places, you know. And even the cottage where he first learns magic from, forget the other wizard's name. Uh,
Yeah.
there were there were a lot of names in this one. As per usual, we're terrible at remembering them.
I
Um,
don't know what you're talking about. I remember every name that I cared about. I'm just kidding.
but the settings I think were meant to be very simplistic, but they weren't underdone in such a way that I felt like I was being gypped when we went to a new setting. It was just
Yeah.
it was enough to set myself in it and get on with the plot. Oh,
Get
Gavin
it. Yeah.
Gem.
Ogan. What was the guy's name?
That's something like that. It was
I forget how you pronounce it. It's Ogion.
Ogion.
Yeah, I forgot how you say it. That was the guy.
Whatever. Whatever, whichever one though, like his hut when they were learning, that was a very easy setting for me to like place myself in and be like, okay, this is him learning just like the next steps of magic and learning it from somebody who knows more than his witch aunt, you know. It-
Yeah.
yeah, so I think setting was did just enough, but it was efficient in a way that could only be done with good writing.
Yeah. Let's talk about the plot. What did
All
you
right.
think of the plot of this story?
So I think the plot got a lot better towards the end, but it was kind of nonstop. And it was first learn magic, then figure out the shadow thing. They were like, so it felt like the plot was separated into 2 points. The learn magic bit is kind of throughout, but I don't know. It felt like the plot hooked you so fast and dragged you along so fast that you didn't even realize that it was the plot until you
Yeah.
were about 2/3 of the way through the book. You know, it's just like go, 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 go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of my take on it too. From what I mentioned earlier about like being halfway through the book and then being like, "Oh shit, I'm halfway through the book." Like I didn't realize the book had started yet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, like there's clearly a storyline here, but it didn't feel like a cohesive storyline at any point in this book. Even once he was running from the shadow and or at least the shadow remade its appearance and was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna fuck you up." Um, even then, it was like, "All right, is this the plot? Like, is this our story, or is this just some other minor incident that also happened to happen before too?" And um, I feel like you could have broken this book into so many different stories and it would have made way more sense. Like you could have made his entire childhood a story right up until he summons the shadow the first time and like be that the end of book one, and then book two is his time at school, and then
hmm
book three is his reemergence to the shadow, and like that would have made an epic trilogy. But instead it's all one book and it's really kind of a short book, and I don't know, it just didn't feel like any of the storylines had time to breathe and be a storyline.
yeah. I think that plays like that is like more or less what V.S. Drake is saying when the plot was
Yeah.
very and then and then and then and then and then and then and then. uh, so yeah, I know we've been doing a lot of comparisons with this. It's hard not to with these older books because there are books that we see these patterns in, and they're books that borrow from these patterns, and we've learned a lot about writing since then. And Dune does suffer from a similar thing of here's the location, here's what's going on, here's the plot end,
Yeah.
next thing. And it's harder to find the through line that really carries you, and you're just kind of just like sprinting from point A to point B to C and so on. Like you said, not enough room to breathe.
Yeah.
And the thing is like independently, these as like little short stories, the plots were potentially compelling. Like, what would it be like to be a wizard hunted by something that you unleashed? What would it be like if that wizard hid? What would it be like if they were unable to hide? What would it be like if they were to fight back? It explores all of those things superficially. To me, this
Yeah.
weirdly reads almost like a prequel, but a prequel that already had a more well-defined book as the main book, this feels like the thing that was made to fill in the gaps for like a more well-rounded book, but it's the first book in a series, so it isn't that.
This feels like a summary for a mega series.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is this is a series that does end up being fairly big, so again, it's hard not to wonder how does that translate throughout the series? Like, is this if treated like a prequel, even though it's the first, and then the rest are what actually fill the world in, you know? Because
Yeah.
there are compelling elements to that. To wit, um, uh, let's talk about some of those compelling elements. Like, what did you find the most compelling about this book?
um I'd say the most compelling aspect of this book is for I was gonna say something, but now I'm torn. Um, all right. The most compelling thing to me was probably the magic system. I feel like it was interesting to hear about like how, especially at the end when the Ged and his original master were talking and trying to explain things to his original master's sister or somebody. Um, and she was like, "Well, how come you don't just make food out of magic and eat that?" And he's like, "Well, I mean, we could, but that food wouldn't give us energy. And it's not about the magic doesn't replace stuff. It just gives you a certain power over stuff, and it's mostly illusion, with the exception of true name magic and having mastery over another thing."
Mhm,
And I kind of went in a little bit about what that meant in terms of like controlling those elements and having power over those elements compared to the illusion of bringing something into existence like light, which isn't something you need to survive, but you have the power of light, which you can use to utilize light, but not necessarily fill yourself with light. Um, so I felt like that conversation, as well as just the general premise of true names and how the magic primarily worked off of illusions, was kind of interesting.
mhm. Oh, I thought there was
That's what
gonna
I
be a
got.
follow-up to that.
That's what I
I thought
got.
there was gonna be a follow-up to that. It's like but, honestly, you kinda hit the nail on the head for me as well. The magic system was the most compelling thing to me. You talked about the nuance of, uh, what's illusory versus what's not, but I thought also one of the most compelling bits was how names were figured out from nothing, or or basically had to be passed down, and how those names depend on location, timing, the more broad category versus narrow uh category, like the name changes and the idea that these are all these words are a part of some ultimate spell that runs the universe, I thought was like a really cool way to show scale for this magic system without telling what the scale is. Like it's like this could be as much as like we've got some words for some stuff and it just works, or it could be this is writ large a world that is built on the power of words and what those mean to the fabric of the universe that they live in.
Yeah.
Seems vs. Drake wasn't terribly compelled by the book. Uh, thought it was fun seeing spells from D&D in the book. Almost certainly some of the ideas were traded back and forth. I mean, they came into existence very similar times. Um, I think because the magic system is so like because the magic system is what it is, this is the most wizardy wizards ever to wizard outside of maybe Gandalf. So like it is so highly academic that yeah, I can't see how there wouldn't be some back and forth. And there are bits of this book that I've also seen in like other writing. Like there's so many good little bits, but as a whole feels like it's not something that we're used to, so I'm not going to say it's something that leaves something to be desired as a whole, but like if it's a different kind of read, it just is.
Yeah. One additional aspect of the magic system that I felt played really, really well in the story is the moment when um Ged had his fisherman friend with the kid who got terminally ill, and they had a local witch who was good at healings and herbs and stuff, and she was unable to help the kid, so they called on Ged and was like, yo, can you help? And he was just like, the fuck are you asking me for? You got her right there. Like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna ask her what to do. Like, the fuck, guys. Like, that was a great moment where it could have been like, and Ged waved his hands and magic did its thing and the kid was okay. And instead, um, we get I concur with what the witch did. Sounds good, guys.
Well, I actually like that there are those kinds of limitations though in this book because
Yeah.
like it makes it seem like you should just be able to like say a word, wave a hand, and anything can be fixed by it, but it shows that there are limitations and areas of growth for the rest of the world. We saw a lot of time skipping in this book, and I wonder if like in other books there are time skips as well. I kind of know that there are to an extent because there's a Studio Ghibli movie that is based off of this series, and Sparrowhawk is fully grown in it. So, but what it does is it creates space for the world to grow in ways that aren't entirely reliant on magic. You know,
Yeah.
um,
VS Drake says he loves seeing the naming here and how that was borrowed in the King Killer Chronicles. Uh
yes,
I don't
great.
know why I didn't think about that, considering that's my where the fudge did it go? My example book that I usually have around here.
You know what? I put it down in a note when I was reading. I was just like, uh, because I was trying to think of other books specifically that used naming as like the main magic. And oh yes, you're correct. Um, but when naming is the magic convention, King Killer Chronicles absolutely uses it, but like it's not the only one, and there's a reason why it transcends, is because the power of words is something I think that a lot of people can relate to, especially authors, you know, but
Yeah.
but this is the even Earthsea, like, borrows it from other things. The power of names is something that goes back to the beginning of storytelling, and
Yeah.
this was a really good way of showing. I think this took that concept to another level, and I think that's part of the reason why it's considered one of the seminal works of high fantasy, is
Yeah,
because of
absolutely.
how it treated that system. And I think that's why everything else feels so quick and truncated is we only got to see how all that worked because it was here's a situation that required this context, here's a situation that required this context, here's a situation that required this context, and we had to see it all to really get what the like where some of the limitations are, how it can grow, how it works, and especially, and we can use this to slightly wind it up a little bit, is that ending. So what did you think of the ending of the book?
Yeah, the ending, I so um deciding how much to talk about now and how much to say for final thoughts here, but
Mhm.
um I felt like a lot happened at the end, and it was a summary from a story that was already a summary. um I feel like the way that the fight with the shadow went down felt good. Um, it felt earned. It felt like Ged had learned, um, or he had grown his character in a way that he could face his shadow, metaphor and physically.
Mhm.
Uh, um, but also at the same time, there was just so much. There's so much unknowns going on at that point in the story. It's kind of like you don't I didn't feel invested in the story anymore.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
So, yeah, so it was an earned ending, but it wasn't the most compelling ending because
Yeah.
you weren't invested in it. I I get what you mean. It didn't have the impact of some of the endings that we've read before for that very reason is that there were like 20 other little endings throughout this book. And so when you get to that one, you're like, is it the one or is it just kind of the next one? You know? But one of the things I really did like was that ending bit about how this was what it means for a man to face his own death, you know, to know it, to accept it, to face it. And I thought, man, if this had just been a little more cohesive, that line would have hit so much harder. And it was a great one to begin with, but it does get kind of undercut by the fact that there's like 20 other little endings along the way, and they aren't as smooth as you would hope to carry you to that point. But I did like how it was I liked how the ending was treated within its little bubble. Like you said, it was an earned defeat of the shadow. He had clearly learned what he needed to and knew how to face it because of what had come before. It was just like this close to being like what I would have considered probably one of those top tier endings from like all books that we've read.
Interesting.
Because if there just wasn't the emotional undercurrent to give the poignancy to that ending, because I felt like that could have been extremely powerful if it had that emotional undercurrent the whole time. And instead, it just kind of feels like when you're playing a video game and you're just kind of fast traveling to everywhere and
Yeah,
then you stop for like a week and then you come back and you're like, man, that ending was awesome, but I wish I would have just like gone all the way through, because if I did, then all of those other stops would have felt a little more powerful when I finally got to that point.
yeah,
So like it suffers under that, but there's so many great elements to this that I can see why it's a favorite, but I also totally understand and feel everybody who's like, man, this good but not great.
yeah, yeah. All right, let's jump into final thoughts. Let's make it official.
All right.
What were your final thoughts?
Um Final thoughts are, this is a book that I think I might give to people who want a quick and easy high fantasy read, who might want to just learn a little bit more about like the roots of where high fantasy came from. I think it's a good but not great book to me personally, where it's got a really great magic system. It has a bunch of different settings in which it's used. You have the main character is like likable enough. A little bit of a shithead sometimes, but it's the kind of character you come to like as it goes. Leaves some things to be desired, but I think I would give this like a yeah, I'd give a soft recommendation on it to anybody who just wants to learn more about where high fantasy has come from, and you know, maybe we'll find out that the other books make it more worth it, but you know.
Yeah. For me, my final thoughts of this book was despite it being as short as it was, if it wasn't for book club, I would not have finished it. You know,
Oh, fair.
we delayed our show a week and I still only finished it today just because I was so uninterested in continuing the story. Um it never draws you in. Is my biggest gripe with this book is it felt like Lagoon just skimmed the surface of this story and never dived in. And if the author isn't invested in the story, I sure as heck aren't going to be invested in the story as the reader. And there weren't enough compelling aspects of this book besides the story to make me want to invest in it. I enjoyed some of the subtle writing techniques that were utilized in this story that we talked about earlier tonight. Um, but world building was interesting but flat. There wasn't enough depth there. The story moved, or the plot moved way too fast. Um, the secondary characters were absolutely non-existent in terms of details. Character growth was kind of there. There was definitely some visible growth on Sparrowhawk's part. Uh, but there just wasn't enough here for me to be like, I want to continue the series and I want to tell everybody I know about this book. I didn't even feel the extreme urge to discuss this book. So, uh,
Yeah.
pretty scathing review, I'd say, on my part to say that, but yeah.
uh
By no means was it poorly written, but it just wasn't compelling.
yeah, certainly not by the standards that we usually have, but I found some elements compelling enough, but yeah, that's why I would give a soft recommendation. VS Drake says that this is a high fantasy historian suggestion, like Lord of the Rings. and we will talk about this when we get to the side pieces, but Lightning Thief and Strength of the Few have these more like if you want compelling reads, there's a difference between like there can be good writing without something being a page turner, and that's kind of what this felt like. There's
Yeah.
some very good writing, but it is not the page turner that I think and we might have set this up with our own expectations because of how this was like presented to us. And I think it's only right that we're honest with you all. Adam obviously has no problem with that. About the fact that this book does leave something to be desired if you want something that has that page turner draw. And this just kind of isn't, unless you're just that deeply into everything high fantasy that it doesn't matter if there's an inkling of magic, it's a page turner for you. Unless you're one of those people, that's just not how this book goes.
Yeah. Let's talk next books. Up next we have Storm of Iron by Graham McNeil. That's for May 2nd. And then after that, June 6th, we're going to be reading Cosmic Love at the Multiverse Hair Salon by Annie Mayer. I believe that's none of us have read it, but it sounded pretty funny, so we thought we'd give it a shot. Kind of novel.
Yeah, and then for our LGBTQ, that is for our Pride Month book. Coming up next, we're going to have our usual beach reads. So submit the ones that you think are easy reads. All right, hiccups. And for August, we are going to. I had a theme that is no longer, I think, appropriate, so we will get back to you on what comes after July.
All right. Side
Uh,
pieces. What'd you have for side pieces? V.S. Drake had some side pieces: The Strength of the Few and The Lightning Thief.
all right. I'm
Percy Jackson, Hierarchy. Yeah, this is some solid reads.
Yeah. The Hierarchy series, I also finished up to what there is, which is only the second book of the trilogy of the presumed trilogy, and I also made it through the second and third books of the Horus Heresy. The Warhammer 40K books, and then the rest of my time has been mostly spent catching up on the various podcasts that I listen to. So
Yeah, I also read The Strength of the Few, based on The Will of the Many being pretty good. I also enjoyed The Strength of the Few. I didn't read anything else because it took me so gosh darn long to get through this book. Uh, I did listen to a ton of music this last month, which is why I took so long to get through the book, because I was listening to music instead of books. But
you
sometimes it's
cheated
nice to have a little
on
break
work
like
with music?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I've been with you. I've been on a music deep dive as well, which if anybody wants to talk music, DMCL is open to that too. Speaking of which, final plugs.
Yeah, let's do final plugs. Let's see here. dmstable.com for everything you want to know, including all the links I'm about to rattle off for you now. We have a YouTube channel. If you're watching us right now on Twitch, it's below your video. If you're watching us right now on YouTube, you're there. Audible is the primary way that we listen to these books. Well, read/listen to these books. It has a large collection of audiobooks as well as a subscription service that makes it convenient to grow your collection. If you would like to give it a shot, head over to dmstable.com/audible and give us credit for sending you their way. Let's see what else. Patreon. We are the DM's Table on Patreon. Link is below the video if you'd like to see that. That's where you can vote on what book we read next. The votes are always very, very close. So if you want to have a big sway in what we read next, head over to our Patreon and tell us what to read. We also have some socials. We're at the DM's Table on Facebook and at DM's Table on X. Check us out there. And of course, we have our Discord channel, which Alex mentioned just a moment ago. Hit us up during the show or some other time, and we'll get you the link to our Discord. Yeah, that's pretty much what I got for plugs.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this month. Sorry for the delays, both in the week and in the timing. My bad. But seriously, thank you, everybody, and we will see you next book.
Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight, guys, and see you next book. Okay.